I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Been moved and second, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to something that's not on the agenda? All right, old business. Road right-of-way vacate. This is the second time we're talking about this. Russ, you wanna let the council know what the planning commission had to say?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Planning Commission met last Tuesday night. Everybody voted in favor of vacating the right-of-way on Jersey Street, kind of between 3rd and 4th. It was a certain section of what they petitioned. You'll notice in your packet, I kind of highlighted like the area that it kind of figures out. This way, the reason for the petition was the lot that's down there sold, and this way they can shift the house further to the north to be able to build outside of the floodplain.
It's on the screen for you.
It's a pretty standard deal. There's no plans that I'm aware of to extend Jersey Street from where you can see from here, which is 4th to 3rd over here. And this is really kind of like very porous, like really hilly and whatnot. So at this point, the city has no plans to do any kind of improvements. There's no utilities in that area as well, so there's no issues. So.
Any questions for us?
Has to cross that creek twice to get to 6th, I assume, or 5th, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he would.
Expensive.
Oh,
It would be, yes.
And that'd be the only future use, and that doesn't sound practical.
I don't see it being practical. Most of that land outside, once you get out in that area, is in the floodplain, and for somebody to be able to develop that is, I don't see them, financially, I don't see it being feasible, so.
Any questions for Russ? All right, thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Anybody from the public like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion? All right, I will entertain a motion.
I motion to approve the vacation of the city right away as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Susan?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next agenda item is the cost of living. Scott, do you want to take this since we kind of spoke about it in
I'll
finance?
start. So the discussion we had in budget and finance was around, with the assessed valuation going up and inflation. Those two things are somewhat related. The question is, how much can the budget afford to provide for a cost of living? That's a number that's set every year. So there's cost of living, there's merit, are the two fundamental pay vehicles the city has. So the question is, with inflation, where it is, do you try to follow that aggressively? The problem with that is, you're moving the needle and it doesn't go backwards. So if you go, whatever percentage you go up, it's that percent plus the following years. So part of the problem is if you try to follow the inflation, in the high inflation years, it's going to set, your base that you probably can't continue to, you'd have to shrink your following years to make it fit within the budget. So the conversation we had and the council needs to have is, how do we provide more based on assessed valuation going up this year? So general fund will have more without making it a permanent increase, which is what your COLA would do. So the conversation was around, merit stays as it always was, talking about like a 3% cost of living. And then mid-year, look at what's going on with inflation, with assessed valuation, and then do some level of stipend, one-time stipend, that would effectively, be a larger increase for that year. So I think what still needs to be discussed is the formula for that stipend. Is it same size fits all? Is it percentage? Those types of things. But that was the discussion that came out of the committee. Obviously, I think the council needs to talk about that and figure out what makes sense.
Glenn, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, traditionally, we've given us just a certain percent across the board for COLA, but, given the uncertainty, who knows what's gonna happen with inflation or whatever going forward here. So I guess the thought here now is to do a kind of hybrid system here, start out with the 3% and then adjust somewhere in the middle of the year, depending on a lot of different factors, so. And we still get the merit raises on your evaluation, so everybody's gonna get something.
Yeah. Essentially, it's like all city staff gets a bonus at Christmas.
Mhm.
This would be looking at doing either a mid-year bonus or an end-of-the-year bonus on top of that.
Okay.
But not putting the city in a position when the economy is saying we're gonna be entering a recession,
Right.
where inflation's gonna, retract, and not putting the citizens in the city in a position to where, and our staff, to where now we're looking at, okay, what do we have to cut to get there?
Right.
Because we're in a recession now, revenues aren't keeping up with what we increased to.
Right.
Okay.
It's usually a year delay when property tax starts to you start to feel from the recession. So this is kind of your bridge to,
Mm.
you buy 6 months of extra time to look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that comes out in June.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I like it.
I don't think property tax will retreat much, if
Mhm.
this next year, it'll probably be the year after, but
Right.
at least this gives us another year of data to say, okay, we're good, we're going good doing this year, and then seeing what the overall economy does in housing. I mean, it may never retreat, and next year we may say, hey, we're gonna make up for it,
Right.
so.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible approach. The market's just so unpredictable right now. Yeah, I'm good with
Yeah, I think the downside, doing it just the straight higher COLA, is that, as we see what happens to the assessed valuation go forward, obviously cuts is the most dramatic, but you might be in years where it's zero, just because you're trying to, you overswung and now you gotta get back, so
Right.
it's like, you have to do zero a couple of years to get back on the same trajectory that you're on, so I think it just gives us, the intent is to do more this year, based on where we're at. But this gives us 6 months to figure it out and see what the actual numbers coming in for the next year assessed valuation, so we'll have a lot more information to make a better decision, I think, for future years.
that. And I like that the cost of living is being addressed, and not all employers are addressing that when it comes to annual raises, so I think that's a good step on our part, but doing it responsibly is the best approach, so, yeah, I'm good with that.
Is there anybody here from the public who'd like to speak to this agenda item? No? Further council discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
You got this one?
I will give it a shot.
Okay, good luck.
I move we approve are we approving it at 3%?
3%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the merit stays.
Right, so, yeah, I approve maintaining the merit, doing 3% for COLA, with the understanding that we will revisit it in June, to review potential stipend. Do we want to talk about the amount of the stipend, or do we want to wait and actually see what that is?
We talked in
We
committee
did.
about waiting to see as we get closer
Right.
to those projections.
Okay.
To see what that might.
So, open-ended stipend. That's my motion.
You get that one, Amber?
So let's review. I move maintain, merit, 3% for COLA, with the understanding that 6 months we'll revisit a stipend.
Open-ended.
Open-ended stipend.
I'm sure what that means.
I don't either, but we'll figure it out.
To be determined.
There you go.
To be determined.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Who seconded? I did.
Susan did. Next item on the agenda is the 2023 calendar for the city council meetings. I'm proposing, I think all of you are aware, that we keep it the first and third Tuesdays of the month. Besides in January, we have 5 Tuesdays. So I figure for the council, for you guys to get a little bit more extra family time, whether it's wanted or not, that we move the first meeting to January 10th, which would make the second meeting in January 24th. So 10th and 24th in January, and then we continue the first and third Tuesdays. Is there anybody here from the public who'd like to speak to this agenda item? Nope. Council discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion.
The only other thing, as far as the calendar goes, is that traditionally we've taken off all the federal holidays. Almost 2 years ago, there was another federal holiday added, and that's Juneteenth. We did not take that off this last year. So, so that would be a request to follow the federal holiday calendar.
I think it's the next item.
Is that on there? Okay.
Yeah.
No.
All right, I'll get
Next
that
item.
one. So,
Oh, yeah, it is
Yeah,
together. It's just the next
yeah.
page. It's the
yeah,
next
all right,
page.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it's not a separate.
What day does Juneteenth fall on?
You know, I don't know.
June. But if
June, the
it's
Something that ends in a
if it's a
T?
Tuesday, we would have to
June
make
the
that
10th.
change. Then we wouldn't have a council meeting on that Tuesday if it's Tuesday. So it doesn't matter.
I think it's June 16th, you know,
It's June 19th.
So that's right.
I think it's the 19th. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
19th.
so that does not fall.
Okay.
That's on Monday.
Close.
Yes, that would be the other change. Thank you, Glenn. So,
Are you ready for a motion?
I am,
I motion to designate Juneteenth as an official city holiday
and to approve.
and to approve the amendment to the January calendar, which will put the second and fourth Tuesday instead of the first and third for council meeting.
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is the Budget Policy Reserve Balance Fund. Scott, kick this to you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for quite some time as a council about really, I think the intent was to, rather than have a policy target of 25%, give a range of 15 to 25% as the policy. That way, we can stay within policy while we're making adjustments, and sometimes you've got to drop below 25 for doing some other things. So just in an effort to stay within a policy that still is fiscally responsible, still meets guidelines, shouldn't really negatively impact any bond ratings. You know, the intent was to really just adjust it from 25% to a range of 15 to 25%. I think the rest of this, and Glenn, I haven't poured through this yet, but I assume the rest of this is what we're currently doing today as a
It
policy?
is. The last time it was addressed, I think it was 2016.
Okay.
Last time the council adopted a reserve policy.
I think that's the first time we ever had a reserve policy.
Yeah, I don't think it,
2016.
yeah, that's the latest ordinance we could find on that, or the latest policy statement.
Okay.
So that's how it currently is written.
So really, it's just amending the numbers from 25 to 15 to 25.
Right, for the minimum. Yeah.
Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak to this agenda item? Seeing none, council discussion? We've been talking about this for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I know we kind of set a goal to have this policy changed by the end of the year, so we can
Mhm.
start new year with a new policy, so.
Okay.
And you've all seen the plans on the reserve funds last time we showed. I mean, there's a multi-year plan to get to 25, and depending on a lot of variables, how many years that's gonna take, you know, based on assumptions, we had from like 2 to 5, 2 to 4, depending on which fund it was, which is still the plan.
Mhm.
So we'd actually still, would be in policy sooner, but not to 25% goal any quicker.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. It's in guidelines and it doesn't affect our rating.
No. I mean, we talked about it with Ben, and this is kind of, and Scott Corey can correct me if I'm wrong, he kind of indicated this is more in line with what most cities do, is
Yeah.
kind of give a range.
So I was wondering if,
Well, and our
yeah.
bond rating is being affected mostly by the general fund reserve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're gonna be hitting our general fund reserve by the end of next year already anyway, so.
Mhm. Okay.
Sounds good.
I'll entertain a motion.
We just wait for you to say those words. I move that we adjust the budget policy reserve balance fund from 15, or from 25 to 15%.
15 to 25.
The range.
Sorry.
Yeah. There's a reason I didn't
Yeah.
speak up.
So she motions
Second.
to adjust the budget policy from 25% to 15 to 25% on the reserve fund policy. Correct, Susan?
Mhm. Correct.
And Corey seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next is the electric rate ordinance. So I'll start off with this, if that's okay, Scott.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this for quite a while. This is first reading, so the intent is no rates technically change, or I shouldn't say no rates, no bills will change. This is to take everybody's bill and actually make it more transparent,
Mhm.
as we talked about, to separate out the meter fee, to pay for the amount that the city's bonds are paying for, so that'll adjust annually.
Mhm.
Based on when we get bonds paid, the meter fee comes down for everybody, and then, which should adjust the rates,
Right.
because you're pulling that bond money out of the rates and putting it with a meter fee to make it more transparent, so that citizens know the meter fee pays for anything the city bonds. So that's the intent with the next 3 readings of these ordinances. I know that we're going to probably need to have a finance committee meeting prior to the next council meeting before these ordinances are passed, because there's a little bit of discrepancy right now in the ordinances that's got brought up that we need to verify with Ben before these ordinances are passed. But that's the intent of these ordinances, is not to change not to increase anybody's bill.
Right.
It's just to realign the way that people see their bills to be more transparent, so that they know what they're actually paying for within that bill. Did I hit that right, Scott?
Yeah, I mean,
Or-
the bill will change.
Yeah,
But
correct.
the amount owed will not.
Right.
And so we have ordinances in place that actually talk about rate under the current format's changing in January 1st for, which one is this? January 1st for water. And so the intent with this new ordinance is to be cost neutral to the citizens, but it will be displayed on the bill a different way, as Casey indicated. So the meter fee will be different, should look different than it has in the past, and the rates should be lower than per thousand that you've seen in the past. So it's really just same amount that we've already, unless Ben has come forward with the need to change what we've already got in ordinance for water and electric, should be no impact to citizens. And that's the part that, in seeing the numbers, I was confused about. I just want to make sure that there isn't incremental increase that he's suggesting over what we already approved back in August for the rates for '23. I think the other thing that this does is, if you look at the water, had proposed rate increases all the way out through January 125. I think the new amendment's just gonna be 1 year, right?
I took it that's what he was proposing.
Yeah,
with
so
what he
single
did.
year, and it'll be revisited every year
Right.
as far as rates, as opposed to, I think what we did was, 3% or some 5% on the previous ordinance. We can talk to him about that, just, if that still makes sense, or do we just revisit it every year, and the council just has to vote for a rate increase if it's needed?
You have anything to add that, from your perspective of committee meeting?
No, I think, just a review, just for people listening, a little bit overview of why we're doing this in a little bit more depth, is that as you bond money for capital projects, let's say you're putting in new sewer lines or whatever it be, before, the base rate was just kind of calculated by council vote, depending on the needs, kind of changing it, kind of pulling that lever. We want this to stay completely consistent with what would be owed monthly. You don't really think of bonds as an annual thing, but if you broke it down and divided by 12, you think of it as annually divided by 12, and how that would look spread out over all the citizens who have a meter, regardless if it's water, electrical, etc. And so it's spreading that debt out. And so the mechanism that I'm not very clear on is once a bond is paid, once it's matured and when we paid it, what process is going to be there to change the base rate? Do we have to revisit that at every
Year.
time?
That's why it's every year.
Okay.
So if you look at the way this is stated, it should call out
Okay.
meter fee. Sorry about that. And we probably need to be a little clearer in this ordinance about, what this, call it
Right.
meter fee. And so that, or debt fee, I think we talked about calling it bond or debt fee.
I think we agreed on bond fee.
Yeah, bond fee. So, I think we detail that in ordinance, and then every year, if, bonds payments fall off because they've been paid, then the council would obviously then adjust downward because there's less to pay the following years. And
Yeah.
subsequently, as projects are bonded to pay for substations or sewer, then the bond fee would then have to be raised in subsequent years to pay for that.
Sure, I understand all
Yeah.
that. My concern is that these bonds are 20-year bonds. And in 20 years, one of us better be around to remind everybody the way that these come
Well-
off, because we're gonna get the same habit that we did before, because, where the meter, why do we have this meter fee? Well, it needs to go up, because we're,
So, that's a great point, and I think that's why in this ordinance, if possible, we need to spell out what's in that, and what only is in that, and, and it needs to change, reflected on the debt payments going forward.
And I think, Corey, to go to your point on that, from my perspective, if they're not doing that, it's gonna affect their rates. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So
right.
I think the rate will guide this, and that's,
Mhm.
like Scott said, as long as the ordinance is spelled out correctly, that this is the intent, that the bond, meter fee, whatever you wanna call it, is just for bonding, then really the only thing that the council would really have a lever on is the rates with your operating costs, because your bond would only affect your meter
Yeah.
fee, so.
I'm just going with my head here a little bit. I mean, it's, I guess the issue that I have that maybe I want to kind of forecast down the road is the mechanism of payment of that bond. So it would be really nice if that specific rate could come out and go into a separate account, and that is your bond, that's what you write checks with for your bond payments. And it's out of that, if the payments could break down out of those bills, because then there's no money there.
I think we do, don't we, Glenn? Don't we? When somebody pays that money, I mean, we transfer that bond payment money into a separate account than just what our utility is, correct?
Or is it all paid out of one?
I think it's a
That's
capital
all.
improvement fund.
Okay, so
So,
it's out of the CIP.
so, finance director has come up with a number, so really what I think we need to have in ordinance is the formula that we agree that we're gonna use for that bond fee.
Mhm.
The formula is gonna be outstanding debt, and it'll be an average of, so there's a formula that it uses, and I think we just put that in there, and it's like, it will be every year what this formula is for that bond.
Right.
And then the rate part is gonna be adjusted based on operating costs and cost of goods and all that.
Which really, the formula would just be X number of meters divided by your bond payment. per year.
I think it was a little more, if I remember, it was a little more complicated than that. I think it was probably, I think you need to take an average of all the bonds, right? Because there'll be some left, 5 years left, you know, so we just need to get specificity as to what that looks like. And if we can put it in here, to your point, then you gotta go change the ordinance if you're not gonna follow the map.
Right.
Because the ordinance is intended to be there so that if the citizens know that, you know, they're not changing that bond, or when the bond changes, that meter fee, I keep calling it meter fee, I know you guys are calling it bond fee, but that meter fee doesn't change with it, then they have a legal avenue then to enforce the city to actually do that. Where we could make the change without an ordinance, because it's just clerical at that point, but then there's no legal avenue for citizens to actually force the city to follow that policy or that ordinance.
Yeah.
That makes it.
So, I mean, is it, and I need to know more about bonds, but does it function like a mortgage? I mean, is the interest front-loaded and it's the same thing where it's all,
Yeah, bonds typically taper down.
that's the tapering down part that I'm trying to get at. So it's, you get a lower bond rate as you get further down, right?
Correct. Typically.
So you wouldn't average the year.
But you hope your finance committee is taking a look at it
Yeah.
annually and saying, okay, council, we gotta adjust this.
Well, there is gonna be a formula that gets you that, so
Yeah.
it's gonna look at the remaining years.
So this year,
We'll
this is the
know,
bond
we'll
thing.
know what those payments are.
Yeah.
We'll know, I mean, it's a schedule, just like your
Oh, yeah,
mortgage.
It's an amortization.
So, yeah, it's an average, so we'll know, and we'll be able to calculate that based on this is what the, you know, the bond meter fee should go to next year based on what's left. Or
And it-
what we just added.
And what we may be able to do, and Glenn, you correct me if we can't do this, but could we not, once we get this passed, then the finance committee takes a look at all our bonds again, takes a look at those amortization schedules, and goes ahead and schedules that out and amend the ordinance to include that in the ordinance, saying this is what the meter fee will be for these following years. And then if the council at that time bonds something, then they have to go in there and amend those meter fees. Bond fees, whatever.
I suppose you could do that with, what you're proposing is to do all your debt service out of a set fee, which I guess would be the same for everybody.
Correct.
The downside of that is, well, two things. One is, that's not how we've done that in the past, because, let's take the debt service on the power plant. Most of that debt service came out of your rates, not your meter fee. And the reason you're doing that is because your largest users are paying the most for that debt service. If you're just switching now to just doing a set fee for everybody, the same meter, that means your large users are gonna be saying, this is the way to go, guys,
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
But then you're putting the burden more on your smaller users. So historically, what we've done is we've protected our lower users by having a very low meter fee, whether it's water or electric, and a higher rate to spread the cost among the higher users. What I'm hearing you do right now is proposing to do the exact opposite. So that whatever debt service is gonna fall most heavily on your lower users now, because everybody's gonna have that. Right now, and on the electric side, one of the reasons we didn't have that on here tonight is that many of your highest users don't have a meter fee at all. Their meter fee is zero. So even if you go up to whatever we're proposing, 10 or 20 bucks, they're not gonna care. That's such a small part of their bill. So, but maybe I'm not understanding where
No,
you're actually heading
that's,
with it.
we identified that early on, I remember, and we talked about even scaling the meter fee and having that as based on usage, just to put it all over there, but I remember that was a concern early on. We talked
It
around
sounds like
it.
But the intent of it
a
is.
rational
It is,
approach, but
yeah.
a very
Yeah.
complicated one.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you would do that.
Yeah, it would be very difficult to implement. I
It would
imagine.
be, and I mean, every person that has that meter is getting the same service to that meter. So what I'm hearing you say, I guess, is maybe we need to revisit what our larger users are paying on the rate. Because from my understanding is our larger users actually pay less of a rate in electric
Yeah,
on
they
a
do.
kilowatt
We have
basis.
numerous different rates. See, that's the problem. You have about 12 different electric rates.
So, to me, it should be, I don't think it's equitable. I mean, if you have a meter, you're paying for the same service to that meter. It's about how much you turn on your spigot after that meter is what. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand what Glenn's saying though, and, you know, we could raise the rate structure for all the users, including the heavy users. Maybe that's the answer where, you know, we offset, but that rate's not gonna be then allowed to pay the debt, right? So that's the problem. is
Right.
We got two buckets, but to offset the impact to the low users, maybe that rate then is affected downward
I was gonna say.
to make it, you know, make it a wash, and we get the rate back, right? So we're basically just shifting the lower users more heavily on debt and less on rate than they currently pay today.
Right, you could approach it that way, yeah.
And then the incremental rate that you just took from the lower users goes on to the higher users. And your rate amount stays the same, and your debt payment amount stays the same.
I mean, you go back to the original problem. So if we left it the status quo, and that does make sense, your higher users should pay for more of your debt. I mean, I have no problem with that at all. I mean, it helps lower income families out big time. But you have to address the original problem. So if that's your philosophy moving forward, and that's what we practice, what the hell's a meter fee for? You know, we had this fee on there the whole time, and they said, okay, well, that's our debt. So we kind of focused, okay, well, if it's gonna be our
Yeah.
debt, make it our debt.
Well, there's a cost to the meter. It's either install it, maintain it, do all
Sure.
that. That's really what it's there for. So, but what a lot of cities have done when you come to service the debt, it's easier to say, we got 2,000 meters, so we're gonna raise $2 per meter across the board. And that's what everybody's paying. But our system is so heavily weighted, we have all these different fees, so the people, like I said, you know, that our two highest users don't have any meter fee at all. There's no, they just pay a rate and that's
And
it.
they have a lower rate.
And it isn't, yeah, it's a different rate than everybody else pays, but they're the ones paying for most of the debt service through their rates, not through a meter fee.
But
So how do you make
yeah,
that
I
equitable?
agree.
How do you make that transparent?
But we don't need to solve the
and equitable
problem.
at the same
differently.
time?
Like, the problem is transparency in what the meter fee is. That's it. That's where we
Right.
start.
Yeah,
So that's where the intent of this came from.
Right.
Right.
To make it more transparent so people understood what their bills meant and
Right.
what portion of it is. I mean, if we have another issue within our rate structure, then that's gonna have to be another conversation.
Yeah,
Right.
almost sounds like
Yeah.
that needs to be addressed first.
Yeah, no, it's a good conversation. I think that's the issue is that.
But that's only on
we've been-
electric.
no, you have different rates, you know, on the other ones too, as
On
far as
water,
commercial
sewer.
and industrial rates versus residential and whatever. We've mainly talked about residential, and that's okay, that's what we're trying to sort of, and that's most of our users, but not, you know, especially on the electric, our larger users are not residential, they're gonna be our institutions that we have here, so.
So we have,
So can you make your policy just residential? That your meter fee is based only for residential, it's only, your meter fee is based on that. So the, whatever percentage you want the debt to come out of the high users, and then, but then the rest of what's remaining is spread out over the meter fee?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do whatever. It's
Well, essentially,
simplicity.
I'm just trying to
That's
say
what we're doing today.
You're doing it right now.
I know.
I mean, that's, yeah, I mean, that's what we're doing, and that may be the only way to handle it, is that way, you know.
Is this leave us status quo?
No, no, I think we just need to look, and we had these conversations multiple
We
times
did,
on
we did.
trying to model out, you know, the lowest user versus the highest user, and what, you know, what the impact would be of this policy. And I guess when we hear how he got to these numbers, we'll be able to try to do that and model that against 1,000-gallon user versus, you know, 50,000-gallon user. Old way and new way. And then, you know, commercial user that doesn't pay meters, which I don't fully understand.
Well, only two don't pay meter fees, right?
What's that?
Only two don't pay meter fees. Commercial users still pay meter fees.
Yeah, I think I was just actually looking at them the other day, there's a, you know, and I'm not a rate expert or anything, but there was a number of rates, that we have in there that there was no actual meter fee in there. But yeah, our two largest ones don't have a meter fee at all, they just pay their own rate, we have a special rate for them.
And maybe it's worse, I don't know. Maybe we just go back and just same rate across the board. Everybody pays the exact same. And everything's paid out of rates. I don't like that, because I still think that there's a
Yeah.
transparency issue.
There is, I mean, we know what the rates are, we know what
So-
we know what that number is, we know what the franchise fee is, you know, you're maintaining easements, et cetera.
Mhm.
The base rate was the only one that made us all kind of uncomfortable, because we didn't really know
So,
what it represented.
but, I mean, we know what we've been using to pay the debt. We know that. Some of that's been coming from the residential, and some of it's been coming out of the rates from the large users.
Yeah,
Why
actually, I
couldn't-
would argue most of it has.
Okay, so
we
why
were here
couldn't we
20 years
then
ago.
take that same ratio, and they now have a debt fee
Based on
on the big ones?
Yeah,
And
rather-
their rates would be adjusted accordingly, so that,
Right.
you know, so they're continuing to pay their share, it's just a different way.
Yeah, I think there's probably a more equitable way to do it.
Yeah.
If we get people to understand it, though, that's going to
Right.
be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, but, so we're now just moving the large non-meter organizations would have, you know, carving off what we used of that into the debt payment, that is now, and everybody else's would stay what it was, right? Because they have no more burden. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It does. I'm just thinking about how, like Glenn said, one, how you explain it, for transparency reasons. And then, so
Yeah, that's
essentially you have
tough
a
one.
different rate structure for your residents,
Which we already do.
which we already do,
Yeah.
but you have a different billing structure for your residential than you do for your
No,
commercial.
I would say the commercial, or the nonprofits, or whoever's getting this, would have the same structure. They would now have I guess a franchise fee. They don't have franchise fee either?
Everybody pays the franchise.
Okay,
fee,
so
yeah.
they would now have, instead of just rate and franchise, they would have
Their
rate.
meter fee would be exponentially.
Yeah, they might have to, it might be the equivalent of 100 meters. But that would all come out of their rate, right? So it'd be a net neutral event for them.
Well, I'd have to show you, like, our highest user is Baker.
Yeah.
And they have consumption, but they also have a demand charge and a bunch of other charges in there, and you gotta be aware of that, plus the franchise fee and everything else. So they have a very complicated rate, but it's their own separate rate. We charge them differently. And
Right.
same thing with the school system.
Right.
There's already a host of other things that are in there that we charge them right now. So we could break it down differently or whatever.
That's-
I don't.
But as our debt goes up, their rates are going up to support that, their share of it, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know how they did that 20 years ago, when
Okay.
like with the power plant.
Yeah.
I don't know how they
Okay.
adjusted to do that, I don't.
They just
And
adjusted everybody's rate at that
I
point.
think I think they're up there, but
Yeah.
it's then impacted everybody differently, because you have so many different types of rates and
Yeah.
so many different users that it's
Well,
hard to
if
say
you
what the exact.
increase, if you increase a person that's getting paid, or getting charged 9 cents a kilowatt hour by 10%, and then a person that's getting charged 12 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what our residents are, then that's still convoluted, because the 9 cent a kilowatt hour is only getting raised 9 cents.
Right. That's what I say, this is really, there are people who do this for the rates for a living. It's not me, I can tell you that. And so that, we get into rates and you start doing the debt service versus it's a complicated path to go down, because you have so many different rate structures, and then you look within each one of those rates, and wow, there's a lot of different ways to go about it, because not everybody has a demand charge. That's for our high users who are, really driving that demand. But you and I, as residential customers, aren't gonna have that in there. So that's a different type of billing structure there. So, so anyway, yeah, it's really hard to break this down and compare resident with, commercial versus, because everybody's just a little bit different on their use. Everybody's a little different in the way they're actually billed right now. The only thing I didn't want to do is, the transparency, I think, is a great conversation. I just didn't want to see the debt shifted, the
Yeah.
burden of the debt shifted to your lower, because we've
Yeah.
always protected
No,
them.
And we've
Yeah,
always.
we don't wanna do that.
That's the opposite of why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, so have we created a rate, structure monster over the years that we've got way too many rates, or what's the need
No,
for?
I don't think so. I think it's typical for a city this size, but, obviously with our larger users, we've traditionally done a different rate for them, and I don't think there's really anything.
I get that part, but
Unusual.
I mean, to me, there should be like 3. I don't know how many we have.
Could do that, yeah, well, about a dozen.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we would have a dozen different organizations that would
Even have different
warrant.
ones for churches. So you have to explain to everybody why you're changing their rate then. I mean,
So you have a residential, commercial, and a nonprofit rate.
Right,
I mean,
could do that.
and a high demand, you know.
Yeah.
Well, we have,
Right.
yeah, we have an industrial rate.
Yeah, the industrial.
off the top of your
Yeah.
head, and maybe you can't, but Baker and the school district are our top two users.
Yes.
Do you know what percentage of total consumption that they make up?
It'd
I'm gonna say it's
time of
probably
year.
probably 15-20%.
That's kinda where I had it in my head.
Probably throughout the year, yeah, they're a good portion of it, they really.
So you have
are.
residents paying for 80% of the debt, and then paying for possibly 20, and
Yeah. not
But
sure.
it depends, I mean, summer months, they're not.
Yeah, I'm just an average throughout the
Yeah.
Over the
year.
year, yeah.
Yeah, what it would be, yeah, it'll, by the season, go month by month, and it won't tell you anything, but for the year, that's probably close. I'm probably wildly off when I don't know.
I mean, this,
But yeah, they pay a pretty high percent, I mean, obviously, they're big users. So that's why they have a different rate.
right.
Well, it sounds like this is gonna be a longer discussion than what we
Yeah.
anticipated.
Yeah.
To figure out.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a little more
it feels like
convoluted.
there's a path here, because you know what the answer is. The
Yeah.
answer is nobody's rate change. Nobody's amount
That they
they
pay.
pay
Right.
changes. So if you can put a formula together that does that, and then can stand up to changes in debt, we should be able to model that.
But I think going back to either Corey or Susan's point on that, Scott, is, when you even mentioned it, I feel like we have an issue with our rates. If we have 12 different rates in the electrical system.
I mean, that's for people that, that's why I asked. I mean, if there's a reason to have it, let's do it, but we'd have to have 12 different formulas then to do this.
I mean, it's a problem. I think we definitely pitched to Ben in the next finance meeting, and he's done this a few times.
I think it needs to be restructured. That 12 different rates just seems
That seems,
crazy.
yeah.
But I also don't know what that does to our overall budget, and we have to look at that impact, because we're not gonna want anybody's rates to increase if you limit it down. So now how do you
Mhm.
change that without changing anybody's? And it's impossible with
Right.
12 different rates.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see a way to do it without making the base rate variable. You know
Which
what
is
I'm
gonna
saying?
make the ordinance convoluted, which
right.
then takes away the whole purpose.
Yeah, there goes your transparency goal.
It does, that's sacrificing one for the other.
Right.
I mean, let's take it back to finance and workshop
Yeah,
it some
this
more.
sounds like a conversation with Ben.
Yeah.
Is there any public here like to speak to this again? Okay. Are you good taking it back to finance? I do have a question when we get to the next
Yeah,
one.
I mean,
just
it's great. I mean, I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, that's something we tried to avoid. It wasn't clear the numbers, how that was gonna impact it. So, I don't think we're any closer than we have been,
I don't think
you
so
know,
either.
to an answer to what we're trying to do.
I think it was probably maybe a little bit bigger of a conversation than we had anticipated, if we're trying to just go
Well, I
that, chase
think-
that transparency.
I think in our mind, we're just like, no, just take out the bond amount,
Yeah.
separate it
Right.
out,
Yeah.
and you pay that. Your rate actually lowers, your
Right.
meter fee increases.
Well, I mean, in the power plant example, I didn't realize that the debt was being paid out of the rate so much, and then the higher consumption variable really,
Yeah.
this is why we have these discussions.
Yeah, that's
Right, exactly.
why.
So, next agenda item is water rate ordinance, which is similar discussion, but I did have a question, Glenn. So we have different rates for our water?
For high consumers.
Sure.
Really?
Between residential and business, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the
Just
only,
two.
it's
It's
not
not
like
two?
the, that's, it's
Okay, it's not like the electric.
No,
Okay.
no, you don't have anything.
I can handle two.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's
yeah,
12.
That's all,
Right.
Gets me a little,
which makes sense. I mean, water is, a little simpler to deal with this. And then you have the sewer, which again, it's based on your water consumption. That's,
so that only has two.
yeah, I don't know how many rates we got on there.
But effectively, your
We're
sewer
out.
has two
Sewer.
because of it's dependent on water, right? Yeah.
So the residential will have the sewer averaging.
Right.
Yeah,
and
so
then
it is 6
Business
months.
doesn't, so other than that, it's the same rate.
Okay.
So business, we don't average those? So what, I guess that brings up another question for me, that I've never asked, is why do we average residents and not businesses? Does anybody know?
No idea.
Just what we've done since I've been here.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious. No, I don't even know
It's
what they're
common, I
watching.
can tell you it's common, and it's, you know, to do that, because I guess, you know, residential is gonna be, well, the argument for the residential is that people in the summertime are using water differently, so they're filling pools up, they're watering their lawns and stuff like that. So if you don't average it during those non-summer months, then they're gonna get a pretty high bill, because it's based
Okay.
off
That
of
makes,
sewer.
no, that makes sense.
Yeah,
to
because we
me.
don't have separate sewer meter. You can do that. That's very expensive, a long way to go. So what most towns do is average it so you don't, so in the summer, you don't get a really high water bill followed up by a high sewer bill based on that consumption. Now, businesses typically won't follow that pattern. They're gonna be more consistent with their water use.
Okay. No,
So
that
I believe
makes,
that's the reason why
that
it's
makes
done
perfect
almost
sense to me.
everywhere.
I just never thought
Yeah,
about it like that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's because of you use water differently in the summer.
Anybody from the public like to speak to the water rate ordinance?
It makes sense to have
Might have to have a work session.
the committee or somebody look at what the differentiation is in those 12 rates.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how you can even describe 12 different entities in town. So I'd be interested in that, and then
Well,
how different the rates are.
That's what I was gonna say. I'd like to see those 12 breakdowns
Mhm.
and see what the rates are for each 12 of those. See, is there really difference, or do we just have
Right.
12 different categories
Right.
and 3 different rates
Right.
within those categories?
Yeah.
Correct me, so for every one of those 12 rates, every one of those had to be voted in by council?
Yeah, it's all set. by
Yeah, that's the only
ordinance.
way you can actually set rates, whether
Okay,
water,
that's
sewer,
what I would
electric.
assume.
All this has to be done by ordinance.
Okay, I'm just wondering if in years past, like some organization came forward and was like, hey, we kind of like to have some lower rates, and then you just got done.
It could have by ordinance though.
Right, right.
You'd have 12
right,
different ordinances out there.
Right, and it was just in the
So I-
packet, we got voted on.
I pulled it up, there's the residential, business, commercial, heavy commercial, industrial, public schools, clubhouse, sorority and fraternity, university, city rates, church rates.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Wow.
You even have separate- I forgot about the sorority.
Does
rate.
it
Yeah,
define
three
each
rates.
one of those? I mean, is there a definition around, do I call myself
Is there not
a
one for
sorority house?
fraternity?
How do we,
Yeah.
She said sorority, yeah.
so, I mean, is there a definition, or is it just by name?
For all facilities owned and operated by a university for university purposes, that's under university, the sorority. It doesn't
So-
give,
Yeah.
University approved
so
student
they're,
housing.
and they have different meter charges, I mean,
So, I mean, small, you mentioned small, you meant business, large business, I mean, are those defined? What's,
That'd be defined by
So-
usage.
It's how they're
they're
zoned.
defined by, yeah.
It's the
So it's
usage.
up to, commercial is over 90,000 kilowatts. Heavy commercial is over
Oh.
360,000
so it's a
kilowatts.
volume?
It
scale.
is, crazy. I thought it was how it was zoned, the way you were reading it.
Yeah.
No, it's by percent of usage.
So it's basically just a volume rate schedule.
Which is nice.
So
which
Amber,
you
that has
don't need to have
the,
separate rates, you just publish what your usage rate schedule is, and if you hit it, you get it.
that has the rates in those
That's a
ordinances.
good point.
Mhm.
I mean, you need to call each one out by classification.
Yeah,
Because if I'm in one classification and I exceed it, and I move into the next classification, I don't get the benefit of
yeah.
that.
No, you're right, you could have just one ordinance.
I'm stuck in the
That
smaller
has
rate because I wasn't
marks
classified
left
in the
ahead.
next level of business.
If it's all based on consumption.
It makes no sense. It's really consumption rate schedule.
The rates are built into there, I was just, so, go back up, Amber, if you could, on the heavy commercial one, that's around 9 cents. I thought that was around the university one too. Where the university rate is. So that's 6 cents.
Mhm.
2011 changed to 7 cents. Huh. Interesting. And they're all billed differently. Yeah, we gotta take a look at all that.
Yeah. This is almost work session worthy.
But you make a good point, Scott. It's all consumption.
Right.
So- So that's one policy.
So why do you have to classify? 'Cause
One
you're
ordinance.
gonna, if somebody exceeds their classification, they should have been classified differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it's based just on rate, what, and I assume when is it set? Previous year, or how do I change? So I come in as a club,
So that is something that, like Jeff out at, he will, I think it's Jeff or maybe it's Pat, I'm not sure, that yearly they'll go and look at consumption. Sorry, their consumption,
okay.
and that will classify if they need to bump up or bump
He's doing
down.
exactly the same thing.
What's confusing about it is the way they're labeled. I mean, you might make it red, orange, gray. I mean,
Right,
Like, this makes, like, it seems like you're getting a break because of the nature of what your organization is. And that's not the case. It's
No.
sheer consumption. And that, I think the labels on there just really throw people off. 'Cause it's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, because you're a sorority, we give you a discount here. Because, no, it's not
Right.
because of that. It's how much you're
Well,
using.
we need to make sure that's not the case, but it doesn't sound like it is.
Yeah.
Well, but sororities doesn't have a power amount in there.
No,
Yeah, it does. I thought, that's right there, per kilowatt hour of
Per
meter.
kilowatt, but it doesn't
they
have,
have different rates.
it doesn't have that because you use 90,000
Oh, yeah.
kilowatts
No.
per year.
Right.
That's why you're charged that. So some of them are rate-based, some of them are
Yeah.
Ah,
purpose-based.
Okay.
Wow.
So there's what we tap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have fun, finance man.
You're on it.
Glad that I'm not.
A goal for December of 2023.
Like some of what we do, we spend a lot of time figuring stuff out, we end up right where we started.
That's exactly what
We build these
But
sandcastles.
we know a lot more than we did starting out.
Yeah.
That's right, we do.
And there's nothing wrong with
That's
that.
No, there's
That's
And the-
meaningful
It's a
conversation.
learning process.
The intent was good. I mean,
Well,
the intent was
yeah.
transparency, making it easier for people to decipher. And then
Yes.
we find out that we have
Yeah.
12 different things to figure out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the goal is to lower rates for lower income families.
Yeah.
And that goes completely against what we're trying to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of that, is that the 13th rate?
Why are thou? Yeah.
Why
No,
not?
I mean,
No, you're right.
I mean, we've got 12 classifications, some based on usage, some based on affiliation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, if that's the intent, you go try to make that happen.
Good idea.
But don't you think we tackle the bigger issue along with that instead of just trying to take the low-hanging fruit?
No, I agree, but if that's kind of an overriding theme that, the council wants to do as we're looking through this, we kind of look at that as well at the same time. Because you change any of these classifications or rates, and if it's just a sum of money that you're keeping the same at the end, someone's going to have to pay more if someone's paying less. That's just the bottom line. Or the city makes less, right? They just reduce the overall revenue. So you got those two options, shifting the cost around or taking less if you're trying to impact a certain, ideally everybody, lower rates, but that's more of the big picture.
What do you guys think about having and I'm talking electrical rate, specific study completed to see how municipalities, organizations are billing, what they're billing their customers, what their rate structures look like comparable to ours, to try to model a new, to not reinvent the wheel, see what everybody else is doing, and try to simplify ours.
You gotta find out everybody's different. because
Yeah,
not
you can bring
everybody has
value.
a small university,
Mm-hmm.
I doubt you're gonna find sorority or, fraternity rates anywhere, or even church rates, so we got there because of the structure of our city, and it's unique to us, is what it is. So Ottawa probably have some similarities, they got a small university there.
I would say Ottawa would be a
So
good one.
they'd be a good comparison. I don't know if you're gonna find any huge differences.
I mean, someone like Ben is a good resource because he's
works in
in
that.
Right, yeah,
multiple
he's-
cities and he's
He
really
sees
kind of.
this all the time,
Yeah.
so. I think he'd be a good place to start. And then if we need more data.
I just think having a baseline to start with might be
Yeah.
beneficial, because we might be talking in circles for
Yeah.
quite a while.
But you just chase it at a different angle now, and I like your angle of working in a low income rate. I like that a lot.
It's not that I don't dislike it, I just feel like you're doing one thing, and you still got 12 other issues ahead of it, and I'd rather just,
Well, it
Figure
can all,
out
it can
one
all be
encompassing.
resolved by how you structure the new scale.
that's what I'm saying, if the council wants to go to a usage scale, to where, I don't even know the kilowatts, but 10,000 kilowatts, up to 10,000, you get charged this. Up to 20,000, you get charged this. Up to 30,000, you get charged
But there
this.
have to be an outlier for the low income portion, because that's, I mean, you can have some, I mean, how many low income families live in a house that's got old windows, that's just burning through
Right.
gas and
Yeah,
electric,
I was
and,
gonna
you know,
Low income and low
That-
usage don't necessarily
that wouldn't
coincide.
measure them.
But how would you define a low income?
That's the now, that's-
Right.
And
I
then
was
how do
hoping,
you-
I was
how do you-
hoping to
how
not
do you
discuss
prove
that now.
And,
We'll have to figure that out.
yeah, and I see what you're saying there. I guess my counter to that, when we talk about windows and stuff, that typically that's heat.
It is. I'm
So that's gas.
Right.
We don't control that
We don't
side
know
of it.
this, no, yeah.
So electricity is typically, in my opinion, the size of the house.
Mhm.
How many lights you have, how many,
Sure.
that type of stuff.
It may be an individual application type thing, and then that's, I don't know how you prove that you're low income to a city.
I definitely think this is something we need to
It
talk
is,
about more.
it is.
Yeah.
Stream of consciousness.
No, I get it, and
Yeah.
we've got to throw everything and see what.
Based on some of the customers coming in, sorry, I'm just throwing this out, we've had a lot that say they come from places with senior citizen,
I think senior citizen would be a huge one too.
Right.
and that would
Ties right
be
in.
easier to
Yeah.
define for our staff.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
good call.
I think this is going to be a long, tough
yeah.
It should be.
one.
There's a lot of layers to this.
But if finance
Sounds like it
committees,
should be.
Amber, I'd really urge you to be heavily involved in this, since you are very aware of our rate structures, of our billing systems, all that stuff. Be involved in all
So
these.
we're covered for 23 on ordinances, right, for rates?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, we just actually went through that,
Yeah,
so
in August.
you've already, so yeah, it's not like I've got to rush through
So-
this and.
The second reading of this may be sometime out in the future.
Yeah, I,
24.
it will probably be
That's
scratched.
possible.
I mean, that's
For
good
now.
as well, but nothing wrong with exploring
No, no, no.
why these things are there.
Right.
Because a lot of these were set, back in a point in time that may not make sense anymore.
Exactly.
And if
Right.
you don't look at it, you just keep, adding to it.
Well, I think a lot of them were set at different times, so
Oh, yeah.
based off of
Oh, yeah.
requests.
I think I saw the horse watering trough enterprise or the shoeing company in there as a rate.
It wouldn't surprise me.
The stagecoach repair shop.
It's got an old one there, but.
No, and there's other variables too. I mean, how's solar gonna affect this? So if you get panels on your house, now you're paying more for your electricity that you're drawing from the grid, because your consumption's less.
You'd be paying that, well, if
You
you
should
go
be
to a
paying
rate,
more.
why?
If it's based on consumption, if the higher consumption means the higher the rate, or is it, where it's, okay, the higher the consumption is actually lower.
No, I tell you, the only way you're gonna affect your solar customers, maybe in one, if you raise the base
The
rate.
base rate.
But if you do it on a consumption, so we pay back the 11.5, so we pay back the retail rate to your customers.
So we want to
you raise
incentivize
that.
people to do that.
Yeah, so,
Right.
sure, so that's what you wanna do, so you'll actually pay back more, that's what you'll do. You never get a negative balance, it'll just go to zero at the best, and then
Right.
you got your meter fees, that's it. So that's the way, so you're just gonna pay it back a little faster then, I guess, is what you'll do.
Yeah,
But the only way they'll see an increase is if you raise the base rate
that's right.
on the solar, that's it. Because most of them have sized it to the point where they're getting zero or near a zero bill, and the only thing they got left is that meter fee. So.
Which is good, I mean, those families and those households are making an initial investment in their own electricity.
Yeah, it's not
And
cheap.
it's taking the
but-
load
yeah.
off of our internal.
Right, right.
stuff,
And
so-
we've, traditionally, we have probably the best net metering policy in the state. I don't think anybody can beat us on that.
That's where I think a usage still incentivizes that. I mean, if you do
Oh,
usage
yeah,
up to
very much it does.
10,000
Yeah.
kilowatts, you get charged this up to, you know, I'm using round numbers, but
Yeah, but then, I mean, if your base rate doesn't change for those solar folks, then the debt just gets shifted even more onto the consumers from the grid.
no, not if you do what Scott was saying and take the percentage and
Right.
choose
Right.
higher base rate
Right.
for that, and then you spread
That
out
scenario
those.
Mhm.
resolves that.
Yeah,
But then you
I
have
feel
this-
uneasy taking away the solar incentive of the net metering,
Right.
because I think that's a good chunk of the reason why people do that in Baldwin. And
Yeah.
I think it does, I mean, we saw that it helps lower our usage, so we don't have to buy as many generators at $1 million a pop.
Sure,
So,
which means you're having less debt.
Yeah.
which means you're having.
So, does it really mean that though?
For generators, it does.
No, not necessarily, because, you know, aren't we gonna be expected to supply power to those homes in the evenings, and if it's cloudy, if, you know, if the power's out, I mean, so we're gonna have to, aren't we gonna have to
You
build,
still have to,
aren't we gonna have to build the plant to support?
You do,
Non-
but yeah,
all the
typically,
non-solar usage.
yeah, and we just had that discussion, of course, and we did purchase, you're building to your peak. So, during those hot days, you know, your solar panels are producing at their peak, so they're taking the load. I mean, I've got a couple years of history now, and you can see that.
Yeah.
As the hotter it gets and the sunnier it gets, the more generation it's giving. So what it does is it does reduce the peak load that we would have on those days if we lost our grid power. So
Right.
we would be able to, so, I mean, if everybody had, you know, theoretically solar on their business or their houses, you know, we'd see our peak demand drop significantly because they would just be taking that demand off at those peak hours. The problem comes when, yeah, you'd have to have an unusual event where it's really hot, and it's after like 6 o'clock, and, you know, the only thing you got is your engines at your
Right.
power plant. That'd be a really strange day to have.
or a February event again.
February possibly, but again, that affects most gas. You know, I don't know. You know, 2 Februarys ago, we ran most of the town electricity with one engine. One engine ran to 3.
So if we stay
megawatts.
15% or whatever we, you know, capacity above peak, you know, should probably handle those anomalies. The 6
Should, yeah,
PM,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
hot day, 6 PM power goes out and we gotta supply it to everybody.
Bacon
Right.
kids are bad.
Yeah.
Well, and typically at night, your AC isn't running as hard. 'cause the
No,
sun's not beating.
no, your peak demand's gonna be around, you know, between 3 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon, on the really hottest days. But that's when your solar is actually, just like our solar field that we have, it's still putting out a lot of power at that point, just like everybody's rooftop solar is. So it matches, that's the beauty of the solar, unlike wind, it follows your peak demand. Wind blows harder at night, so that's the disadvantage of it. But I don't know if that helps you or not.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that conversation was around the, you know, the solar payback, and I think if we're supporting a green city, I mean, we gotta continue down that path.
Yep.
Right? We gotta incentivize, make it financially viable for people to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it won't happen.
Well, we're not gonna get this all tonight.
Darn it.
Yeah. Clearly.
It's a good shot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good try, we tried.
I might make a motion on this ordinance here and just go with it. That was only first reading.
All right, so nothing on the sewer rate ordinance unless somebody wants to speak to that. So we'll go to council committee reports, budget and finance, Scott.
I think we've covered everything that we talked about. COLA, we talked about the rate schedule, and I have to pull it up. What was one with that? Oh, Is it a different committee?
The substation news went down from 6 million to 4.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
our original prices were around 6 million. Now the engineers are thinking it's gonna be more in the 4 to 4.5 million. And Glenn, God bless him, spent all week last week doing a narrative to the federal government to try to get a grant, 80% grant for multiple things. But
Yeah, and I don't know if we would get those. Yeah, we had a deadline, and I've already heard back from them. They've been very responsive with Department of Energy on that. So there's a huge amount of money they're putting into infrastructure, and now there's one specifically targeted toward renewable energy. So we did put in a grant. Well, it's not even a grant yet. It's kind of a narrative before that that you got to pass muster with them. So we put in the substation, the undergrounding of our lines, and also storage, batteries, backup storage, and so might as well throw everything in there. So, don't know whether we'll get any of that funded, but there's going to be 5 rounds of funding now. So it'll be 5 years of Department of Energy looking for projects to fund. So they definitely want to fund renewable energy. They absolutely do. So it's good to see those programs out there. I have no idea what our chances are. They'll get all kinds of applications, so.
So I found a third, so utility ordinance, we discussed COLA, stipend, we voted on that, and then the fund balance projections. We looked at again, no surprises there. I think Glenn brought some new, city sales tax is 24% above budgeted, what we forecast for the budget, so. I think you said million sales tax, 1.3 property.
For the year,
tax.
yeah, our sales tax has performed very well
Yeah.
for 22, really has. So we'll see what 23 brings.
It's good news, certainly for, general fund reserve health. That's why it looks like we're gonna speed that up a little bit. So that's what we've talked about. And the next meeting is apparently Friday. You guys want to meet Friday?
well, the city's closed.
Yeah,
on
well,
Friday.
I should be off on Friday.
Okay.
So it'll probably have to be
Push it.
Friday, after New Year's?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think so.
So let's look at,
Fifth, or 6th, I'm sorry. Or do you want to go the 30th? But city's closed on the 30th as well, aren't they? Or you guys closed on
We're
the
open.
2nd?
No, we'll be there,
But
we'll have that
a lot of
Monday,
people
next
might be
Monday,
driving
not
on
that
the
Friday.
30th too,
Yeah.
so.
let's do the 6th. The 6th, 7:45 a.m., second floor of City Hall.
That work for you, Corey?
Yep, that's great.
All right, good, Scott.
Yep.
Community development, Corey?
We haven't met since the last meeting. Next meeting's the 23rd, 4 o'clock, second floor, City Hall.
January 23rd.
January 23rd, yeah, sorry. Yeah, we still got 23rd this month.
Just wanted to clarify.
No, good, thanks, yeah.
You said January 23rd at 4?
4.
Public safety, Susan.
We did not meet this month, meeting again January 10th at 4 o'clock.
Public works and utilities, Julie and Jerry are gone.
Here's their,
Yeah, and their notes are in the packet. Talked about the generators, new substation, about the going from 6 million to 4.5 million. Hoping to see that here pretty soon. Talked about the the Newton substation issue that we had. Solar, nothing new at this time. Are we bringing KMEA at the next meeting, Glenn? Are they
Well,
coming?
that would be our intent, yeah, we've got a power pool meeting coming up here next week. I'll bring up, see who's available. They usually, with good notice, they can show up. So we'll talk about the solar project that they've got available down in Pratt.
All the inverters and everything at the solar plant is working correctly, 100%. Talked about the GRIP program, I believe that, Glenn, that's what you.
That's, yeah, That's what we applied for.
And then the creek at Fire Tree has been cleaned and cleared finally after numerous years of issues at those bridges. I think they did speak about the north side of those bridges are wooden and they're starting to rot. So I think Rob and his crew are gonna start working over the winter to build new railings for that area to match the south side. So, and their next meeting is whatever's on the calendar, I can't remember. It's on the calendar though.
I sent it. No, I didn't. There's something else.
I can't remember. It's,
I can't.
It was a
In
strategic
January.
planning session on the 12th, and that's,
yeah. Strategic planning, Scott?
Yeah, we had a meeting prior to the work session just to talk about the work session and got a lot of good feedback from the department heads. So the plan, next meeting is the 4th of January at 3 PM, second floor of City Hall. Keep that in mind. Plan there is to come up with something that's presentable or discussable with the school district on the joint meeting on the 12th. So kind of combine everything we heard and got, and it may just be the high level, focus areas, key performance areas, and just key performance indicators without necessarily having measurement stuff. And it'll certainly be clear about where the focus is, what the plans are, and how we're gonna measure that. I think is still an ongoing conversation.
And my intent for that meeting on the 12th is to treat that as the January work session. So I don't pull you guys in numerous different directions in January, so we won't have a work session just with the council. We're gonna just do the joint work session as our work session.
Okay.
are we having that in the performing arts?
Performing Arts Center.
Okay.
Yep, at 7 o'clock on the 12th is when that meeting is. City administrators, staff comments, anything more?
Nothing further.
Council comments, anything? I just have a Christmas light winners. I don't know names, but I have addresses. I sent them off to city staff already. So 1307 8th Street got first. I don't know if you guys went by there, but they look like the Griswolds
Oh, yeah.
out in front of their house. Holy cow. And full transparency, my kids judged these. There was a 2-day fight over all these, so we have a tie for third, so that way I can keep peace in my house. Second place was 618 5th Street, which is over behind your brewery,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
over there.
Next to the Dell House?
Yeah.
It's,
Third place was the tie, 523rd Street, which is across from the Baker Football Stadium on the corner there.
Mhm.
And then 614 9th Street, which is my daughter calls it the gingerbread house on 9th Street.
Lions.
Lions, yep. So those were the winners. All right, so with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
So we move to second, all in favor say aye. All
Aye.
opposed nay. Motion passes, we're adjourned.